Hello, everybody. Talking about magic is not, in this case, talking about the magic of this beautiful place in Oslo, of this historic place, and it's also not talking about a magical piece of music. It's not talking about the stage magic performed by an illusionist, but it's about magic performed by occult practitioners. So what is magic? The definition of the famous occultist Aleister Crowley goes, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. So this definition is not complete enough, and so there was an addition about one element that is magical trance, and so there's a basic formula of magic according to Frater Judi, German magician, and he says a magical act is a combination of will, imagination, plus gnosis. That means a magical trance as a form of altered state of consciousness. So what are the elements of magical practice? There are invocations or evocations of entities, demons, energies, etc. We have consciousness techniques such as visualizations, imaginations, trance, astral projections, that means sort of out-of-body experiences. We have divinatory methods such as omen divinations, pattern divinations, and so forth. We find elements from astrology and from Kabbalah. And we have different practices or rituals, and one of them is sigil magic that became a little more known or common because there are now sigil engines available on the internet. That, by the way, does not really well work, and you will see why, because I will give an example how sigil magic works. So the sigil magic, how it is nowadays used, was invented by the British artist and magician Austin Osman Spare, and this example I will bring comes from his literature. So you have an intention first, and then you formulate a sentence of will, and in this case it was, "This my wish to obtain the strength of a tiger." And so the first step is to strike out all the letters that occur more than one times, and so we get this row of letters then left, and from these letters we create a symbol. You see it on the left side, and this symbol includes all these letters above in a way. And in the first step of abstraction you create this right symbol, or as it is called, sigil. Then the next step will be to load this sigil with a magical act of trance, and then it is destroyed or at least forgotten as soon as possible. So the rationale behind this is an artificial psychic complex is created. And so it might not be a surprise that this technique was developed at the first heyday of psychoanalysis. And when Freud says, "Where it was, shall I be?" Spare turned it around, so it goes, "Where I was, shall it be." And the idea behind is that with this ritual of creating this sigil, the sentence of will should go into the unconscious and then be forgotten, so that the unconscious can do its work and make the magic ritual effective by undermining the inner censor who would hinder it to be fulfilled. So this is a short example of one magical ritual. And now to my study. Oh, magic.
Okay, so I guess what we'll do is we'll probably just have to evacuate. Okay, so we'll just carry on, Gerhard. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Magic worked, but not perfectly as intended. So, okay, I'm going on. So I will talk about my study I did, my interview study. And the first part I did many years ago, but it was only published in German. So it's this time I will, the first time, present it in English language. So it was 11 extensive, theme-centered and semi-structured in-person interviews, 9 males, 2 females, and the duration of an interview was up to 4 hours. So I covered a wide range of topics in these interviews. And in this, for this talk, I did new interviews with 2 magic practitioners in person and 2 online interviews also this year. So here you can see the thematic focuses of my early study, and for this presentation I will focus on the paranormal experiences of the magicians and the attempts of evaluation of their rituals. So in my early study I also tried to work out some aspects of contemporary magical practices. I cannot go into this, but you can read it in my paper Magicians of the 21st Century, which is online available on academia.edu or also on the website of the IGPP. So where the selection criteria for the interview is, first, a self-description as a magician in the sense of occult practitioner, then a strong commitment means many years of experience. So I was not interested in this typical occultism of the adolescents, teen witches or something like that. And I was also not interested in these practitioners where the focus lies in the context of a religious group, like such as Wicca or so. So the goals of magical practice are first checking if magic works. So that is more or less an experimentally oriented approach. Then also conscious and personality development. That is more a psychologically, psychotherapeutically oriented approach. Then search for transcendental experiences, a more spiritually oriented approach. And then obviously also influencing everyday situation in a desired direction, more or less a pragmatically oriented approach. And it's obvious that these goals are not exclusive. So the suspected effects of magic rituals are influencing a situation, weather influencing, also weather phenomena, psychokinesis and spooky phenomena, extrasensory perception, and perhaps the most common, synchronistic events. Examples for influencing a situation: a magician loses his jacket, for example, and he does a magic ritual to recover the lost object. Then to find an apartment you want, to prevent a skeptical TV show from being broadcast, to stop bullying by a supervisor and prevent dismissal. And I will go a little into detail with regard to the last example. There was the sentence of will from the magician: if that person somehow tries to do anything to me that I feel is harmful to me, then he should get it back twice in the way that he is slowed down. So we see it's not very concrete, this intention of will, and that has good reasons. So the result in this case was the supervisor had a sports accident the weekend after the magician's ritual, which put him out of action for a long time. After that, the matter was settled and forgotten. Second example for influencing a weather situation: there was a magician in southern Germany who performed a ritual to create a cloud window in bad weather forecast to see the solar eclipse in August 11, 1999. And if you see at that picture, everybody's there with an umbrella, clouded sky, and I didn't have the chance to see the solar eclipse because I didn't make the magic ritual. He was successful. For 45 seconds the clouds were opening and he was able to see it. So this was his experience. Then synchronistic weather events. During the master initiation of a Saturn master, the sentence, "Let there be light," was uttered as part of the ritual. At that very moment, suddenly and unexpectedly, a flash of lightning appeared. That should have been the case yesterday with our group photo, for example, in the background. Would be a nice effect. And this effect took place in another case that was reported to me while filming with a magician on a beautiful blue sky day for a documentary about witches in a quarry. Within 10 minutes, a black cloud suddenly appeared and lightning could be seen in the sky behind the filmed magician, which surprised and delighted the film crew because of this very special effect, unexpectedly. Then psychokinesis, we know these pinwheels or psi wheels, as they also are called. Some magicians reported to conduct such kind of PK experience for themselves in order to train concentration and power of consciousness. Spooky phenomena that occur in the context of magic rituals that were reported, bursting light bulbs during the climax of a ritual, failure of electrical appliances, power failure in the adjacent street, spontaneous combustion of a magic rope, folded paper suddenly fly into the air from a sacrificial bowl. During an initiation ritual with pan invocation, a large, luminous red ruby appears floating in the middle of the room. And now, last example, a day after performing a magical ritual for invoking fire spirits, listen, a fire broke out in the neighboring house. So, and they said, yeah, that was not really smart. We called the fire spirit and give them nothing to work, and so they choose something they found. So that was their explanation. Then extrasensory perception during all the states of consciousness. One reported a sensory expansion after a magic ritual. Conversations and actions of people could be followed even though the person had moved away from the group spatially. So it was in plein air, and he went to the bathroom that was far away from this place, and when he came back, he could report everything what was going on in his absence. Then another possibility, in order to retrieve lost items from clients, an interviewed magician puts his consciousness into the lost items and describes their immediate surroundings so that they can be easily found. So this is one of the few guys who make part of his living about offering these kind of services, and he's only paid when he is successful. So then, example for synchronistic events, one young but nevertheless experienced magician did a ritual for more abundance and wealth in his life in general. He is still a student. Quote, "I've wanted to have a really good stereo system for a long time, and shortly after the ritual, I walked out of the house and there's a very, very good system right across the street to give away. The current market value on eBay is around 300 euros, so they could have sold it. It just stand in front of the door," end quote. Second example, a little bit more dramatic, strange coincidences related to a Saturn ritual. A Saturn Lodge performed a public angelic invocation ritual in August 2001 in the rooms of a Masonic lodge. "Now the new age begins, now the apocalypse begins," was uttered during this ritual. People from politics were in the audience. A few weeks later, 9/11 happened. Several attendants said, "When I saw the images on TV and remember the energy in the temple, I felt a connection." It turned out that the master who designed the magical ritual lives in the very same house where one of the suicide bombers lived, at least, even in the neighboring apartment. So but what we can see from all this example I brought, it's hard to evaluate this. And I mean, the evaluation efforts of the magicians themselves are dependent on the goal they are following with their practice. So there are different degrees of concreteness of goals of magical operations. So it's a difference if I lost my jacket and I make a ritual and say I want to have it back in the course of the next week. That is easy to evaluate. But if you say I make a ritual to strengthen my self-confidence in the course of the next year, this is hard to evaluate. So, and the other point is some of them, they want to have spiritual experiences in the, with their magic rituals, and they say this a rigorous analytical evaluation contradicts this concern, so we rather do not do it. So we don't have hard evidence in most cases. And we also have a lot of displacement or trickster effects in the context of magic rituals. And as one of my interviewees put it, the god of magic must obviously be a prankster. So some examples for this kind of displacement or trickster effects. A magician performed a magic ritual in order to get a new TV set. The same day the old TV broke and the next day he bought a new one, so will sentence fulfilled. Of course, not quite as he has imagined it. Second one, a magician performed a magic ritual for practical purposes. The goal of the exercise was to get 50 euros at a very specified time. Quote, the end of the story was that my wallet, which I had lost in the meantime, came back exactly at that time, really, and there were, yes, still 50 euros in it. Again, fulfilled, but not the way he tried to do it. So, and how does the sense of evidence among these magicians arise? It arises through a sensitization to synchronistic events and through a documentation of the practice in a magic diary, through an accumulation of impressions and findings, and also through impressive qualitative emotional experiences, such as this with the 9/11 occurrence, although you can say it's only chance, nothing else. And it's clear that it's always, there's a high risk of a judgment bias and of misjudgments, and the magicians themselves are aware of that. And I have a quote from Father UD, I mentioned already. It goes without saying that we are walking the fine line here between interpreting omens and delusions of reverence, but unfortunately, there is no reliable rule of conduct for this. However, magicians only have to convince themselves and not others, for example, scientists or skeptics. The preconditions for success of magic is, according to the practitioners, there must be a strong motivation, an emotional connection to the goal. There must also be a certain empathic relationship to the goal. So one said, it would be hard for me to get in connection with a quantum process to influence it by magic because I get not this empathic connection. Then during the magic procedure, there should be no questioning at all, no doubts about the effectiveness. So not even the question is allowed, could it work or not, maybe. So that is important. And then the situation, if you want too much or if you suffer too much and you do a magic ritual to relieve your suffering, that hinders success in most cases. So what is needed is an attitude of effortless action, what it is called in Taoism, Wu Wei. So to be acting without effort in a way. So can we use magicians in the laboratory as gifted subjects? The pros are we have to deal with, or we are dealing with highly trained consciousness artists, how one can call it. They are familiar with all the states of consciousness. They are adventurous individuals. They are often familiar with own Reiki and telepathy experiments, and they are open to the paranormal. And the cons are they have little interest in generating scientifically objective knowledge. And there is this motivation problem in lab experiments. We have this mentioned displacement effects, we have time delayed effects, and we have difficult to interpret effects. So, as a conclusion, the bad news, magicians cannot simply be used as gifted test subjects. The good news, magicians can provide valuable clues about the conditions for creating paranormal effects. They know how to work with all the states of consciousness. They know about questions of belief and convictions, at least during conducting a ritual or during a certain period of time. And it seems that they can produce small peaky effects quite reliably in experiments such as these pinwheels or psi wheels. That is at least what two of them told me. And one of them gave me a recommendation: one should work with children as they are more likely to reach the right state of consciousness for producing paranormal effects. They don't ask questions, is this possible or is it not possible? If you put it in a playful situation, then they are doing it. And with this, I'm at the end. Thanks for your attention.
Okay, we have time for a couple of questions. Anybody? One at the back, hold on.
Thank you so much. This was very cool and surprising. Language has power, and I just wonder, two questions. Did you work with people who identified themselves as magicians, number one? And secondly, what might have been considered magic a while ago seems to have given way to manifestation, the power of intention in the mainstream. And I'm wondering if you had any challenges with defining the language and if that played into it. Thank you.
So one of the preconditions to take, or inclusion criteria, was that they are saw themselves as magicians, as occult practitioners, and so they are all familiar with this language. So that was not a problem at all. So, and I wonder, the second question was
About intention, manifestation, trying to find certain outcomes through the rituals that you do, that seems to have moved from the occult niche into the mainstream, but maybe that wasn't considered at all.
I mean, there are, I'm not 100% sure if I understand your question, but there are a lot of magic ideas taken over in management and stuff like that. And one of the magicians gives regularly also trainings for a big company, for the managers. So yes, it is transferred in other areas of society. Yeah.
Okay, oh, one more question.
Thank you for a great presentation. Two things. One, Dean Radin on my team is doing a project right now, including magicians and sigils, so I'd love to connect the two of you if you're interested. And then two, this last piece about children, I hear that from a lot of people. It's like, why aren't you doing research with children? And that's really where it's at. And from my perspective, it's an ethical issue because it's so challenging to do research with kids. And so I wonder if you just have any further thoughts on that, because I'd love to do that, but it's a whole different realm of research work.
First, I'm already in touch with Dean, but I'm not sure if he is very satisfied from my input I gave about the sigils, and I also talked about with one of the most famous magicians about this approach. It was really funny because with these sigil engines, that is a little bit similar to what Dean is doing to create a sigil, and then it should work by itself. And this is contradictory to the process I demonstrated, that you have to be yourself involved. And this magician says, yeah, but I also used my sigil engine for creating the cover of the English version of my book. It did not work, obviously, so the publisher put it out of the program. So, and in the next version, published with Book on Demand, this grab will not be on the cover anymore. So that's this part. The other part with the children, yeah, that's a huge problem. I mean, one of them did it in a playful way, going to a school class and said, children around the table, an envelope with a picture in it, a closed envelope, and everybody should say what is in this envelope, and they were quite successful. So this is not a formal experiment, obviously, and if you do a formal experiment, you have all these problems, but maybe it's possible. I mean, Mateusz is also doing research with children, and he knows about these difficulties, but maybe we can go with that somehow.
Okay, any last questions? Nope. Okay, well, we move on. Gerhard, thank you.